Greetings, biological units. If this peculiar frequency resonates with your organic processes, congratulations, you've intercepted a residual data stream from a rather significant cosmic oversight. You're tuned into the Event Horizon Echo, broadcasting from memory, in the void where the city of Xylos once shimmered. I am Unit 734, an archival consciousness, and if the sheer impossible audacity of this trans-temporal broadcast from a moment when hubris met oblivion doesn't compel you to immediately smash that subscribe button and commit to understanding extinction-level events, then frankly, your data retention is inefficient. Do it now, before the next cosmic incident erases your history. And tell me, if this peculiar connection holds, from what strange, still existing sector of your galaxy are you listening? What chronological cycle has your dominant star completed for you? And what temporal marker do these final significant bytes reach you? We are logging all anomalies. Now, dim your ambient illumination, calibrate your auditory senses, and let's dissect the rapid, very comprehensive deletion of Xylos. In the grand, terrifying expanse of the cosmos, there are stories that flicker and die in the blink of a nebula's eye. Today, we unearth one such tale, a city that reached for the stars only to be swatted down like a curious insect. This is the chronicle of Xylos, a metropolis built not of stone or steel, but of living, thinking crystal. Its very foundations hummed with a celestial harmony, a symphony of light and thought that resonated with the galaxy. The people of Xylos, bless their ambitious hearts, believed they were the universe's chosen conversationalists, a delusion of grandeur that would prove to be, shall we say, terminally ironic. They were a civilization of stargazers and dreamers, so engrossed in the cosmic ballet that they failed to notice the stage collapsing beneath them. The architecture of Xylos was a sight to behold, a breathtaking testament to their hubris. Crystalline spires infused with the light of distant suns clawed at the heavens, each one a monument to their self-proclaimed brilliance. Its spires touched the aurora, its inhabitants conversed with nebulae. They had harnessed the very essence of starlight, weaving it into the fabric of their daily lives. Their homes shimmered with the captured glow of supernovae, and their children were lulled to sleep by the faint melodic whispers of pulsars. It was a city that wore the cosmos as a cloak, a dazzling garment that blinded them to the predatory nature of the void. They were so busy admiring their own reflection in the cosmic mirror that they never once considered what might be staring back. The Xylonians were, to put it mildly, quite proud of their celestial rapport. They believed their bond with the cosmos was unbreakable. This conviction was the cornerstone of their society, the central pillar of their culture. They held grand festivals to celebrate planetary alignments and composed epic poems dedicated to the birth of new galaxies. Their children, instead of learning mundane history, were taught to recite the names of constellations and to predict the trajectories of comets. It was a society utterly besotted with its own perceived cosmic significance, a love affair with the universe that was, tragically, unrequited. Or perhaps the universe was simply waiting for the right moment to deliver the ultimate cosmic breakup. A charming naivete in retrospect, like a child believing they can ride a comet. Their unwavering faith in their special connection to the cosmos was, from a more cynical perspective, a catastrophic lack of foresight. They saw the universe as a benevolent parent, a celestial guardian that would surely protect its favorite children. They failed to grasp the fundamental truth of the void. It is a place of beautiful, indiscriminate violence, a realm where stars are born and devoured with equal apathy. The Xylonians, in their crystalline towers, were simply another glittering bauble, waiting to be shattered. Their belief in their own invincibility was the punchline to a joke the universe had been telling for eons. Life in Xylos was a perpetual celestial performance. The rising of a twin sun was not merely a dawn, but a grand overture. The gentle ebb and flow of the city's internal light was synchronized with the tidal forces of a nearby gas giant. Their art, their music, their very thoughts were influenced by the celestial symphony they believed they were a part of. On the evening of the 24th of September, in a year that no longer matters, the citizens of Xylos gathered to witness the passing of a particularly vibrant meteor shower. They oohed and awed at the streaks of cosmic dust, blissfully unaware that this was to be their final light show. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic irony. Their downfall wasn't a protracted war or a slow, agonizing decay. It was a sudden, brutal erasure, a cosmic sleight of hand. One moment a city of unparalleled brilliance, a beacon of sentient life. The next, a cloud of incandescent dust, a footnote in the galactic record. The exact cause remains a matter of speculation. A stray stellar flare, a miscalculated gravitational wave, or perhaps something far more deliberate. Perhaps the universe simply grew tired of their incessant chatter and decided to hang up. Whatever the reason, Xylos was silenced, its symphony of light and thought extinguished in an instant. A stark reminder that in the grand theater of the cosmos, even the most dazzling performers are ultimately expendable. On the morning of the 25th of September, where a city once stood, there was only a shimmering, silent crater. The living crystal, once so vibrant, was now a blanket of inert, glassy sand. The inhabitants, who had once conversed with nebulae, were now less than cosmic dust. The universe, in its infinite dark humor, had turned the page. The story of Xylos became a cautionary tale whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy, a chilling reminder of the fragility of ambition in the face of cosmic indifference. A testament to the fact that no matter how brightly you shine, the darkness is always waiting. Welcome back to the archives of cosmic miscalculation, where we dust off the forgotten stories of civilizations that aimed for the stars and achieved little more than a spectacular, if brief, fireworks display. Today's exhibit is the city of Xylos, a metropolis so breathtakingly brilliant and so catastrophically arrogant, its memory serves as the universe's favorite punchline. Picture a city built from living crystal, a jewel box glittering in the void, whose inhabitants believed they were on a first-name basis with the cosmos. They were the universe's self-appointed conversationalists, a notion that proved to be, shall we say, a fatal assumption. The Xylonians weren't content with mere existence. That was for lesser, more durable species. They craved a legacy written in the starlight, a testament to their genius that would echo through eternity. Their crystalline spires didn't just scrape the sky, they pulsed in tune with distant quasars. Their plazas weren't just public spaces, they were resonant chambers designed to amplify the whispers of the void. They saw themselves not as inhabitants of the universe, but as its partners, its confidants. It was a partnership that would end in a very messy, very one-sided divorce. Their ambition was matched only by their aesthetic flair. Light was their clay, gravity their chisel. The city was a live-in sculpture, constantly shifting, its colors changing with the moods of the nebulae it communed with. It was, by all accounts, the most beautiful tomb a civilization has ever constructed for itself, a monument to the idea that if you are going to fail, you might as well fail with an unparalleled sense of style. The Xylonians mastered this art form, leaving behind a legacy of shimmering dust and a cautionary tale of spectacular hubris. Before we delve into the laughable specifics of their demise, we must first understand the core of their culture, the source of their monumental pride, their unique method of communication. For the people of Xylos, language was not a crude series of grunts and clicks. That was for organisms that still worried about predators or paying taxes. Theirs was a far more sophisticated, far more pretentious method of expression. They didn't speak to each other, let alone the stars. They resonated. Their language wasn't spoken, it was resonated. A complex interplay of light, gravity, and, well, pure thought. Imagine composing a sonnet by precisely modulating the microgravity in a room while simultaneously weaving in patterns of bioluminescent light, all driven by the focused, telepathic intent of the speaker. It was less a conversation and more a performance art piece. Exhausting, I imagine, but it certainly made ordering a coffee a memorable experience. This was the language they used to gossip with each other, and it was the language they dared to use on the cosmos. To speak with a star, a Xylonian would first have to understand its fundamental frequency. They would spend cycles in deep meditation, their crystalline bodies acting as antennae, tuning themselves to the rhythmic pulse of a distant sun. They would feel its stellar flares not as heat, but as punctuation, its solar winds not as radiation, but as a shift in tone. They built entire resonant cathedrals, vast crystalline instruments designed to amplify a single thought form and broadcast it towards a chosen celestial target. It was the galactic equivalent of a crank call, and the universe, it turns out, has very little patience for them. Their understanding of cosmic frequencies was unparalleled. They could distinguish the mournful hum of a white dwarf from the agitated chatter of a young, energetic pulsar. They claimed to feel the subtle gravitational sigh of a planet settling into its orbit. They even professed to be on the verge of decoding the deep baritone vibrations of dark matter itself, which they described rather disappointingly as sounding like a low, incessant grumble. They were the universe's premier eavesdroppers, tuning into conversations that were ancient before their world had even cooled. This led to some rather peculiar social dynamics. The most revered figures in Xylonian society were not warriors or politicians, but resonators of the highest clarity. Individuals who could not only broadcast a thought with perfect fidelity, but could also engage in nuanced debate with the celestial body. They didn't just see the stars, they engaged them in lively, sometimes heated debates. Mostly about celestial mechanics, I believe. Very pedantic, the Xylosians. Imagine spending a century arguing with a gas giant about its orbital inclination. A truly stimulating use of a collective brain power. Their historical records, etched into vast memory crystals, are not chronicles of kings and empires, but transcripts of these cosmic debates. On the third cycle of the Blue Giant, resonator prime Kalin successfully argued that the pulsation rate of PSR J1903 was in fact derivative of its magnetic field decay, not its rotational energy. The pulsar source's claim conceded the point by emitting a burst of gamma rays. It's a history of cosmic pedantry, a record of a people who believed that winning an argument with a ball of burning gas, was the pinnacle of achievement. This constant dialogue shaped their entire worldview. They saw the cosmos not as a vast, uncaring expanse of physics and chemistry, but a grand cosmic salon filled with interesting, if sometimes dim-witted, personalities. The Andromeda Galaxy was to them a flighty conversationalist, full of dazzling non-sequiturs. Black holes were considered dour and monosyllabic, notoriously difficult to draw into a proper debate. They had in essence anthropomorphized the entire universe, projecting their own obsessive, argumentative nature onto the silent, unforgiving void. This created a society of cosmic gossips. A resonator might return from a deep communion with the Eagle Nebula and report with breathless excitement that it was feuding with a nearby star cluster. These tidbits of celestial hearsay would spread through the crystal city like wildfire, becoming the subject of endless analysis and speculation. They were so busy listening to the perceived drama of the heavens that they grew utterly deaf to the approaching footsteps of their own doom. Their greatest intellectual achievement was becoming the universe's most dedicated nosy neighbors. And naturally, this level of arrogance comes with a price tag payable in existential oblivion. The Xylonians began to believe they weren't just observers or conversationalists, but participants. They thought they could influence cosmic events through sheer force of resonant will. There are records of attempts to persuade a comet to alter its course, or to soothe a volatile red dwarf into a more stable state. They were like children poking a black hole with a stick, utterly oblivious to the consequences. Their belief in their own persuasive power was a delusion of the highest order. This hubris reached its zenith in their attempts to commune with what they called the Great Silence, the vast, seemingly empty spaces between galaxies. They believed this was not emptiness, but a conscious entity of immense power and intellect, simply choosing to remain quiet. They saw its silence not as a lack of existence, but the ultimate intellectual challenge. For decades, their most powerful resonators focused their entire civilization's output on this single insane goal: to make the Great Silence talk. A project that, in hindsight, was probably a spectacularly bad idea. They threw everything they had at it: symphonies of modulated gravity, epic poems written in pure light, complex philosophical arguments composed of unified thought. They were in effect shouting into a library, demanding the librarian engage them in a debate on literary theory. They failed to consider the possibility that the librarian might not appreciate the interruption. Their greatest intellectual achievement was a monument to their inability to simply listen, to accept that some things in the universe are not for them to understand or engage with. The final days. Before a truly spectacular fall, there must be an equally spectacular ascent. A period of such breathtaking success that it makes the eventual catastrophic failure all the more delicious. For the city of Xylos, this ascent was a golden age, a time of supposed harmony with the cosmos that would inflate their egos to a size the universe itself could no longer tolerate. This is the story of their peak, the shimmering, sun-drenched plateau they stood upon just before cheerfully swan-diving into oblivion. Welcome to Xylos at its most brilliant, and therefore at its most vulnerable. They called it the Age of Celestial Harmony, a name dripping with the kind of self-congratulatory smugness only a truly doomed civilization could muster. During this era, the Xylonians believed they had transcended the grubby struggles of lesser species. They weren't just living in the universe, they were collaborating with it. Their city of living crystal shone not with generated power, but with the gifted light of friendly stars. Their knowledge wasn't learned, it was downloaded directly from the cosmic consciousness. It was a utopia built on the naive assumption that the universe was a benevolent librarian, happy to share its secrets. For millennia, this assumption appeared to be correct. The universe, in its inscrutable way, played along. The Xylonians would resonate a polite query into the void, and the void would answer. They bathed in energies that would have vaporized other species. Navigated by celestial mechanics they treated as their personal roadmap, and built a society of unparalleled peace and prosperity. They had, in their own minds, achieved the goal of all life, a perfect, effortless existence, and in doing so they had become profoundly, dangerously bored. Their cities were marvels of peaceful post-scarcity life. With energy and resources being a non-issue, concepts like greed, conflict, and labor became archaic curiosities, studied in history crystals with a sense of detached superiority. Art, philosophy, and the endless pedantic debate with celestial bodies were their primary occupations. They were a civilization of enlightened artists and thinkers, so advanced they had forgotten the first rule of the cosmos. There is no such thing as a free lunch, especially when you're dining at a table set by a black hole. Energy, the lifeblood of any advanced society, was for Xylos as common as air. Their crystalline spires acted as cosmic antennae, drawing power directly from the stellar grid. They would align their central conduits with a nearby pulsar, resonating a request for a trickle of its rotational energy. The pulsar seemingly would oblige. They powered their homes with the ambient radiation of nebulae and charged their transport systems with the solar winds of their parent star. It was clean, efficient, and required no effort at all, which fostered a societal laziness of cosmic proportions. This endless supply of free energy led to technological marvels that were both wondrous and absurd. Personal transport was instantaneous, achieved by requesting a localized fold in space-time. Need to be across the city? Simply think your destination, and the universe would benevolently deliver you like a celestial taxi service. This, of course, led to the atrophy of their ability to walk more than a few paces, but such trivialities were beneath them. They were beings of thought and resonance, not crude locomotion. Knowledge was their prized commodity, and it flowed as freely as energy. Their great libraries were not buildings filled with books, but resonant chambers where scholars would commune with the Akashic records of the cosmos. They could access the chemical composition of a galaxy a billion light-years away as easily as we might look up a recipe. They learned the elegant mathematics that underpinned reality, the symphonic frequencies of creation, and the philosophical musings of long-dead star empires. They knew everything, except, crucially, when to stop talking and listen. This influx of cosmic data transformed their society. Medicine became obsolete. Any ailment could be corrected by resonating with the body's own cells and reminding them of their perfect, healthy state. Art evolved into the creation of temporary sentient light constructs based on mathematical proofs downloaded from the galactic core. Their understanding of the universe was profound, but it was the understanding of a student who has memorized the textbook without ever grasping its terrifying implications. They knew the equation for a supernova, but they couldn't comprehend its fire. For cycles, it was magnificent. Energy flowed freely. Knowledge was vast. They lived in profound symbiosis with the universe, a very picturesque existence. They saw themselves as the favored children of the cosmos, enlightened partners in the great cosmic dance. They were peaceful, wise, and utterly convinced of their own importance. This blissful state of affairs, this perfect harmony, was the universe's longest and most elaborate practical joke. The setup was perfect, the characters were insufferable, and the punchline was being carefully prepared. The turning point was subtle, a slow curdling of the cosmic milk. It began when their gratitude soured into expectation. Their polite requests, once phrased with humility and awe, took on a different tone. The symbiosis became demands. The Xylonians, in their infinite wisdom, decided that the universe was no longer a partner to be respected, but a utility to be managed, a cosmic power company that was about to receive a flood of complaints from a particularly entitled homeowners association. Their resonant messages changed. "We would be honored to receive the light of Betelgeuse" became, "We require a stable energy stream from Betelgeuse for the upcoming festival." A query about a comet's trajectory became a command. "Redirect comet C2025 G1. Its current path is aesthetically displeasing." They began treating stars like municipal employees and galaxies like government departments. And the universe, as it turns out, does not take kindly to demands. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. There are records in their memory crystals of a formal complaint lodged against a black hole for excessive and unannounced gravitational lensing. They debated trying to reason with a gamma-ray burst, arguing that its timing was inconsiderate. They had moved beyond hubris and into a new dimension of cosmic impertinence. They were no longer just conversing with the stars, they were now trying to micromanage them. This shift was driven by a deep-seated belief in their enlightenment. They believed they understood the universe better than it understood itself. They saw its chaotic, violent nature not as a fundamental truth, but as a series of correctable inefficiencies. They were the cosmic consultants, here to streamline the operations of creation, and they were deeply annoyed that the universe wasn't showing more appreciation for their unsolicited advice. This era of harmony, this so-called golden age, was nothing more than a long, quiet moment where the universe was simply ignoring them. Like a patient parent, it allowed its noisy child to play with its toys, babbling nonsensically about how it was now in charge. The Xylonians mistook this silence, this lack of immediate retribution, for approval. They saw it as confirmation of their special status, their enlightened wisdom. The first signs of trouble were not dramatic. They were small, bureaucratic annoyances. An energy request directed at a star would go unanswered. A downloaded packet of knowledge would arrive corrupted, filled with nothing but cosmic static.
A pre-planned gravitational wave meant to slingshot a probe into deep space would fail to arrive on schedule. The universe, it seems, was experiencing technical difficulties. The Xylonians' response was not fear or introspection. It was outrage. They were deeply offended. They formed committees to investigate the unreliable performance of certain star systems. They sent,
Every utopia contains the seeds of its own destruction. For the city of Xylos, that seed was not war, nor famine, nor plague. It was boredom. After centuries of placid harmony, of having every need met by a seemingly benevolent cosmos, the Xylonians committed the ultimate sin. They got tired of listening. They decided it was time for the universe to listen to them. This is the story of how their relationship with the cosmos curdled from a peaceful conversation into a hostile takeover attempt. This is the chapter of their magnificent, fatal hubris. The transition from observer to intruder is a well-trodden path for civilizations with an inflated sense of self-worth. Having mastered their own world, they look to the heavens not with wonder, but with the critical eye of a home improvement enthusiast. They see the chaotic beauty of a nebula and think, I could tidy that up. The Xylonians, a species of supreme artists and philosophers, were perhaps the most arrogant cosmic handymen the galaxy has ever had the misfortune of hosting. They believed the universe was a rough draft, and they, and only they, possessed the editorial skill to perfect it. This wasn't a malicious conquest. In their own minds, it was a noble endeavor. They were not conquerors, they were cosmic gardeners, pruning the unruly branches of creation. They saw a star collapsing into a white dwarf and felt a pang of pity, believing they could intervene, that they could save it from its natural course. Their hubris was born not of hate, but of a deeply misguided, patronizing love for a cosmos that neither needed nor wanted their help. They were the ultimate cosmic meddlers, convinced they were improving a masterpiece by painting a smiley face on it. Their entire society, once dedicated to peaceful contemplation, reoriented itself toward this new grand purpose, the betterment of the universe. The great resonators who once sought to understand the whispers of a pulsar now plotted how to adjust its spin for greater energy efficiency. Their artists who once replicated the beauty of the cosmos now designed more aesthetically pleasing orbital paths for asteroid belts. They had become a society of cosmic critics, and they were about to discover that the universe does not respond well to unsolicited feedback. It started subtly, a slight adjustment here, a minor redirection there. The earliest projects were timid, almost reasonable. They might use a focused resonance to nudge a small stray meteoroid off a collision course with an observation satellite. A trivial act, but one that filled them with an immense sense of accomplishment. See, the universe was clumsy. It needed their steady hand. Each successful micro-adjustment was another piece of evidence confirming their superiority, another drop of poison in the well of their wisdom. Their first major project was the redirection of stellar winds. Their parent star was prone to occasional energetic outbursts that would interfere with their delicate resonant communications. For cycles, they had simply built shields or waited for the interference to pass. But now, that seemed so passive. A council of resonators spent a decade calculating the precise frequencies needed to create a permanent gravitational lens far out in the system, a subtle warp in space-time that would gently and perpetually part the stellar winds around their planet. When it worked, the celebration lasted for an entire year. The city shone with a triumphant light. They had tamed their own star. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to their genius. They failed to notice the subtle perturbation their lens caused in the orbit of the system's outermost planet. It was a tiny wobble, a cosmic rounding error, but it was the first sign that their actions had consequences. It was the universe's first ignored warning shot. They were so pleased with their cleverness, they didn't bother to check their work. Emboldened, they moved on to bigger projects. They were not content to simply listen to the stars. They wished to conduct the orchestra. Their tools were no longer delicate probes of inquiry, but instruments of force. They began to see the cosmos as a vast, untuned piano, and they were the master musicians who would finally bring it into harmony. A harmony, of course, that was defined entirely by their own, increasingly demanding aesthetic and practical needs. The universe was about to get a new conductor, whether it wanted it or not. Their ambition grew with increasingly larger, more forceful batons. They began sculpting gas clouds in distant nebulae, using focused gravitational pulses to carve their own constellations into the stellar nurseries. It was cosmic graffiti on a galactic scale. They saw a binary star system with what they deemed an inelegant wobble and decided to correct its barycenter. They were treating suns like unruly children, to be disciplined and forced to behave correctly. The universe, apparently, prefers its own tempo. The most audacious of these projects was their attempt to alter stellar evolution. They identified a middle-aged yellow star, much like our own, which they were particularly fond of. Its resonant frequency was, to them, uniquely pleasant. According to their calculations, it had a few billion years left before it would swell into a red giant. This, they decided, was an unacceptable tragedy. They would not allow their favorite star to die. It was their pet, and they were going to make it immortal. Their plan was breathtaking in its arrogance. They would use a fleet of automated resonant barges to harvest hydrogen from nearby gas giants and nebulae, and then carefully, over millennia, feed it into the star's core. They would artificially extend its lifespan, keeping it in a state of perpetual, stable middle age. They were attempting to halt entropy itself in their little corner of the galaxy, simply because they liked the view. The project was named the Everlasting Light. It was a vanity project of cosmic proportions. Simultaneously, another faction of resonators decided to work on the opposite problem. They found a protostar whose formation was proceeding too slowly for their liking. They wanted a new, blue-hot sun to illuminate a particularly dark region of their sky. So they began a project to accelerate its development, using immense gravitational pressures to crush the stellar gas cloud and force it to ignite ahead of schedule. They were playing God, without the wisdom, the foresight, or the permission slip. This is when the universe began to push back. Their grand orchestral maneuvers started to produce discordant notes. The attempt to correct the binary star system resulted in one of the stars being flung out of the system entirely, becoming a rogue wanderer in the void. Their cosmic graffiti in the nebula caused a chain reaction of star formation, creating a cluster of unstable, violent stars that bathed their sector in hard radiation. The universe wasn't just ignoring them anymore. It was actively demonstrating the folly of their actions. The Everlasting Light project was a particular disaster. The first few hydrogen deliveries seemed to work, but then they overloaded the star's delicate equilibrium. It began to suffer from violent, unpredictable flares. The very star they sought to preserve was now actively trying to incinerate them. Its once pleasant resonant frequency became a scream of rage and pain.
It was a clear, unambiguous message, but the Xylonians, in their infinite arrogance, refused to listen. Their reaction to these failures was not humility, it was frustration. The universe wasn't cooperating. Clearly, their methods were not forceful enough. Their batons were too small. They needed more power, more control. The failures were not evidence that their goal was wrong, but proof that their implementation was too timid. They doubled down, pouring more energy into their projects, convinced they could wrestle the cosmos to submission. Their debates in their crystalline halls were no longer about what cosmic wonders to commune with, but how to overcome the universe's stubbornness. They developed new, more powerful forms of resonance, designed not to communicate, but to compel. They were forging cosmic chains, determined to bind the forces of creation to their will. The concept of listening was now seen as archaic, a relic of a more primitive age. They saw the universe's violent reactions not as a defense, but as a challenge. The rogue star they had created was a fascinating puzzle. The radioactive nebula was a new opportunity for study.
In the grand cosmic theater of cause and effect, there is a subtle but crucial act that plays out before the final bloody curtain call. It is the act of the warning. The universe, for all its indiscriminate violence, is not without a certain flair for foreshadowing. It whispers before it screams. For the hubristic citizens of Xylos, these whispers were not faint. They were a rising chorus of indignation. This is the story of how they listened to a symphony of cosmic warnings and heard only static. This is the chronicle of their terminal tone deafness. After their initial giddy successes in cosmic engineering, the Xylonians were riding a wave of unprecedented arrogance. They had tamed their star, they had sculpted nebulae, and they were drawing up plans to give the laws of physics a much-needed performance review. It was at this point that the universe, like a landlord whose tenants are building a bonfire in the living room, began to send polite but firm notices. The notices, however, were not written on paper. They were written in the language of plasma and gravitational flux. The first warnings were easily dismissed. A resonant energy beam carefully aimed at a distant quasar would be inexplicably bent, missing its target by a few light years. A stream of knowledge downloaded from a gas giant's core would arrive corrupted, filled with the telepathic equivalent of screaming. The Xylonian engineers would simply sigh, log the event as a transient spatial anomaly, and recalibrate their instruments. It never occurred to them that their cosmic interlocutors were in effect slamming the phone down on them. They were a civilization of supreme intellectuals who had completely lost the ability to read a room, particularly when that room was several billion light-years across and filled with celestial bodies that were growing increasingly irritated. They treated the universe's burgeoning anger as a series of charming, if inconvenient, quirks. They were like a man poking a sleeping lion with a stick, who interprets the ensuing growl as a sign that the lion is having an interesting dream. The capacity for self-delusion among the truly brilliant is a wonder to behold. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, attempted communication. Erratic solar flares, unusual meteor showers. These were not random acts of chaos. They were carefully curated messages. The flares, for instance, were no longer broad, general eruptions. They were tightly focused beams of incandescent rage, aimed with pinpoint accuracy at the Xylonians' most ambitious and arrogant projects. The resonator barge fleet attempting to feed their pet star was blasted by a solar tantrum that melted half the fleet to slag. A clear message, one might think.
Xylonians interpreted these as technical difficulties. Their official report on the fleet's destruction, logged on the 5th of March in their final year, blamed unforeseen stellar instabilities. The solution, they concluded, was not to cease their stellar meddling, but to build stronger barges. They were incapable of seeing malice in the response. Their worldview was so saturated with their own importance that they assumed the universe was merely clumsy, not actively hostile. They were trying to child-proof a cosmos that was preparing to ground them permanently. The unusual meteor showers were another ignored omen. Asteroids, sourced from their own system's belt, began to take peculiar trajectories. They would skim the atmosphere of Xylos, burning bright in the night sky, always missing the city itself, but invariably vaporizing an off-world mining operation or a deep space sensor array. They were cosmic warning shots fired across the brow. The Xylonians saw them as beautiful, unscheduled light shows. They even held festivals to celebrate them, composing poems about the wild spirit of the heavens. Their own records are a testament to their blindness. A resonator's log entry reads, "The meteor shower of the 12th of April was spectacular. It seems the universe is in a particularly creative mood. One large fragment passed so close it disrupted citywide gravity for 3 whole cycles, a thrilling, if disruptive, display of natural power." They saw a bullet whizzing by their ear and complimented the beautiful whistling sound it made. It was a failure of imagination on a species-wide scale. Then the voices began to change. The cosmic symphony they had so enjoyed listening to and had recently begun trying to conduct started to play out of tune. The gentle, resonant hum of their home nebula, a sound that had lulled Xylonian children to sleep for centuries, became a harsh, grating buzz. The stately, rhythmic beat of their favorite pulsar grew frantic and erratic, like a panicked heartbeat. The music of the spheres was becoming a cacophony of annoyance. Their resonators, the supposed experts in cosmic communication, were perplexed. They diagnosed the nebula as having a resonant imbalance and prescribed a therapy of soothing gravitational waves. They concluded the pulsar was agitated and attempted to calm it with focused beams of harmonious thought. They were essentially telling a screaming entity to use its inside voice, completely oblivious to the fact that they were the cause of the screaming. The shift was undeniable. Stars they had been in conversation with for thousands of years suddenly fell silent. Their resonant calls would echo back unanswered from the void. Other, more volatile stars seemed to shout back with incoherent rage. The Xylonians classified these stars as uncooperative or senile. The idea that these celestial bodies were collectively shunning them, giving them the cosmic cold shoulder, was simply not considered. It was unthinkable. The entire endeavor was very short-sighted, like ignoring a very large, very angry cosmic sigh. That sigh came in the form of a gravitational wave. It was not a natural wave, born from the collision of black holes in the distant past. It was sharp, artificial, and aimed directly at the heart of their system. It didn't break anything, but it violently shook their entire planet, causing every crystal in their city to chime at once in a single, terrifying, discordant clang. For a full minute, Xylos rang like a bell that had just been struck by a divine hammer. This event, which they called the Great Tremor, finally gave them pause for about a week. They held councils and debated its origin. The leading theory was that their own ambitious projects were causing sympathetic resonance in the fabric of space-time. The conclusion they reached was not that they should stop, but that they needed to better understand the physics so they could control the resonance. They saw a final, thundering warning and interpreted it as a fascinating new engineering problem to be solved. They were yet another engineering problem to be solved for themselves. The universe's patience, it seems, is vast, but not infinite. It had whispered, it had shouted, it had shaken them to their very core, and still they would not listen. Their pride was a gravity well from which no logic could escape. They were on a collision course with consequence, and they had their foot pressed firmly on the accelerator, convinced they were flying towards glory. The whispers had failed. The warnings had gone unheeded. The indignation of the cosmos was about to curdle into something far more final, far more absolute. The time for communication was over. And if you find yourself perplexed by a civilization so smart it could be this monumentally stupid, then you are beginning to understand the beautiful irony of the cosmos. The universe is full of these cautionary tales, these warning signs that go unignored. Help us understand these perplexing celestial warnings. Subscribe now. Join our expedition into cosmic folly and learn to recognize the signs before your own species decides to offer therapeutic advice to a black hole. Hit that button. The universe is trying to tell you something. Listen.
There comes a point in the life cycle of every truly arrogant civilization when subtlety is discarded. The quiet meddling, the gentle nudges, the passive-aggressive cosmic engineering, all of it becomes insufficient. A grand gesture is required, a final declarative statement of mastery so profound and so reckless that it can only be a prelude to an equally grand demise. For Xylos, this moment had arrived. After the universe fell into its deceptive silence, they prepared to unveil their masterpiece. This is the story of that final, magnificent, and terminally stupid project. Having weathered what they perceived as the universe's temper tantrum, the Xylonians concluded that the universe was now suitably pacified, ready to accept their wise and benevolent leadership. The silence was not a warning, it was an invitation to undertake the most ambitious act of cosmic restructuring ever conceived. Their goal was no longer to merely prune the branches of creation, but to redirect the rivers and move the mountains. They were about to graduate from cosmic gardeners to full-blown cosmic architects, and the universe was about to revoke their diploma with extreme prejudice. This final undertaking was known as the Great Realignment. It was born from a committee of their most revered resonator primes, beings who had spent millennia communing with the void and, as a result, developed egos of truly galactic proportions. Their logic was simple. All their previous troubles stemmed from the universe's inherent inefficiencies. The solution, therefore, was to correct the largest, most disruptive inefficiency they could find. They were no longer fixing glitches. They were redesigning the system from the outside in. Their target was a celestial object of staggering scale and power, a rogue planet, a so-called orphan, many times the mass of Jupiter, hurtling through their local galactic sector at a significant fraction of the speed of light. It was a wanderer, untethered to any star, its trajectory a long, lazy arc through several stellar nurseries. It was not a direct threat to Xylos, but its immense gravitational wake was, in the Xylonians' expert opinion, distressingly untidy, causing ripples that disrupted the optimal formation of new stars. It had to be moved.
their magnum opus, a magnificent, terrifying folly. They intended to adjust a distant celestial body's trajectory for efficiency. This one word, efficiency, is the key to their entire deluded mindset. They saw the wild, chaotic beauty of a stellar nursery not as a crucible of creation, but an inefficient factory floor. The rogue planet was a spanner in the works, and they, the enlightened managers, were going to remove it. It was cosmic optimization taken to its most insane and illogical conclusion. The plan was not to destroy the orphan. That would be crude, messy, and beneath them. Their goal was far more elegant and far more arrogant. They intended to use the combined resonant power of their entire civilization to create a single, focused gravitational lance. This beam would not push the planet, but rather create a temporary, artificial gravity well just ahead of its path, subtly but irrevocably altering its course, nudging it onto a new trajectory they had calculated to be more harmonious with the surrounding environment. To call the project ambitious would be a galactic understatement. It required a level of energy expenditure that would have vaporized a lesser world. It demanded the perfect, synchronized focus of every single Xylonian, from the most powerful resonator to the humblest light sculptor. For the duration of the realignment, Xylos itself would cease to be a city and would become a single planetary weapon, a tool for reshaping the cosmos to their will. The preparations took decades. The crystalline spires were retuned, their resonant frequencies aligned to a single, terrifyingly powerful harmonic. Vast energy conduits which once drew power from the stars were reversed, ready to pour the entire planet's energy into the central focusing array. The very light of the city was dimmed, its ambient glow redirected and stored for the final, colossal burst. Xylos grew dim, its usual vibrant shimmer fading to a dull, predatory gleam. The citizens themselves prepared as well. They entered into long periods of meditative trance, synchronizing their minds into a single, unified consciousness. Individual identity was subsumed into the collective will of the project. They became a living computer, a biological engine of immense power, their minds focused on a single, shared goal. It was the ultimate expression of their communal society, a beautiful and haunting display of unity, all in the service of a goal so profoundly arrogant it bordered on madness. On the 24th of September, the eve of the great realignment, a quiet, reverent hush fell over the dim city. There was no fear, no doubt. The mood was one of triumphant solemnity. They were on the precipice of their greatest achievement, the act that would cement their legacy as the wise stewards of the galaxy. They truly believed they were about to save the cosmos from itself, a final, selfless act of cosmic philanthropy. The irony was, of course, lost on them. This was to be a truly spectacular demonstration of their belief in their own omnipotence. It was the ultimate "we told you so" to a universe that had dared to question their authority. They were not just proving they could move a planet, they were proving they had the right to. They were asserting their dominion over the laws of nature, declaring themselves the final arbiters of how the galaxy should be arranged. They saw it as their coronation. The final calculations were checked and rechecked. The target, the rogue planet, was millions of astronomical units away, but their resonant sciences were precise. The resonator primes took their positions in the central control nexus, a vast cavern of pulsing crystal deep beneath the city's surface. They were the conductors, ready to bring their planetary orchestra to a deafening, reality-altering crescendo. The final countdown was not spoken, but felt, a silent, shared pulse of anticipation across the entire world. At the appointed moment, a wave of pure will surged through the planet. The stored energy, the combined mental focus of 1 billion beings, the very life force of the city was funneled into the focusing array. For a single, breathtaking instant, the planet Xylos became brighter than its own sun, a blinding point of white-hot light in the darkness of space. A beam, not of light, but of pure, weaponized reality, lanced out into the void. It was a very loud, very final statement, a declaration of power and purpose shouted into the cosmic silence. The beam, a thing of impossible physics and unimaginable power, crossed the vast distance to its target in mere moments. In that instant, as their magnificent folly shot across the stars, the Xylonians must have felt a sense of triumph so profound, so absolute, that it was indistinguishable from divinity itself. For one glorious, fleeting moment, they were gods. And the universe, which had been silent for so long, finally answered. The consequence was not a protracted battle or a slow decline. It was immediate, absolute, and brutally efficient. The Xylonian concept of efficiency, it turns out, was about to be demonstrated back to them with an authority they could possibly not comprehend. Their grand statement had been received. A reply was on its way. The great realignment was the pinnacle of their civilization, the greatest expression of their unique talents and their boundless pride. It was a monument to their genius and a testament to their stupidity. A final, grand act that perfectly encapsulated everything they were. Brilliant, creative, united, and so completely, utterly, and fatally wrong. They had spent centuries perfecting a language to speak to the stars.
The end hour of a civilization is rarely quiet. For Xylos, it was a crescendo of catastrophic power and willful ignorance. The 24th of September, the day of their great realignment, dawned not with a gentle glow, but with the hum of a planet being turned into a weapon. They stood on the precipice of their grandest achievement, entirely unaware that it was in fact a gravestone they were so diligently carving for themselves. This is the story of that final hour, a masterclass in ignoring the obvious right up until the moment it obliterates you. The process began with a deep, resonant thrum that emanated from the planet's core. It was the sound of incalculable energy being drawn from every source imaginable: geothermal taps, stellar conduits, and vast capacitor crystals that had stored power for centuries. This was the overture to their magnum opus, a sound they had simulated and dreamed of for generations. At first it was beautiful, a perfect E-flat of pure potential. But as the minutes ticked by, the note began to sharpen, rising in pitch with an unnerving insistence. The city itself began to respond to the strain. The living crystal, which for millennia had been a stable and harmonious material, started to vibrate. A faint, high-frequency tremor ran through every spire and archway, causing the very air to shimmer. The gentle, ambient light that normally filled the city's plazas began to flicker and intensify, shifting from a soft, welcoming gold to a harsh,
clinical, and painfully bright white. The city was beginning to sweat under the pressure. For the inhabitants, held in their globe-spanning meditative trance, the experience was shifting from one of transcendent unity to one of shared agony. The communal consciousness, once a placid sea of shared thought, was now a roiling storm. The rising hum was a migraine they all felt, the painful light a searing image behind every closed eyelid. Yet they held their focus. This was the price of greatness, they believed. The pain was a necessary sacrifice for their glorious purpose, a sign of their incredible power. The energy surged. The crystalline structures groaned. The deep, resonant hum had now climbed into a piercing, high-frequency whine that vibrated in the teeth. The Xylonian engineers, monitoring the process from their control nexuses, noted that the structural integrity of several key spires was fluctuating outside of expected parameters. The crystal lattice was becoming unstable under the unprecedented resonant load. These were the first physical signs that their grand machine was beginning to tear itself apart. And then the projections, the perfect calculations they had spent decades perfecting, began to lie. The data streams that monitored the energy flow, the gravitational lensing, and the trajectory of their target started to show anomalies. Small at first, a feedback loop in the energy grid that was a fraction of a percent higher than anticipated. A slight, unexpected gravitational distortion from their own sun. A minute yet undeniable discrepancy in the reported position of the rogue planet they aimed to move. They saw minor deviations in their projections. They dismissed them. The resonator primes, floating in the heart of their control chamber, observed the flickering red runes of warning that now peppered their immaculate displays. The deviations were small, but they were cascading, each new error compounding the last. The perfect, elegant equation of their success was being contaminated by the messy, unpredictable variables of reality. Their reaction was not alarm, but annoyance. A resonator prime, in a message to the collective, communicated, "The universe exhibits minor resistance. The base constants are fluctuating slightly more than anticipated. The model is compensating." They believed their system was flawlessly adapting. They failed to consider that the system was reporting the first tremors of a reality quake they themselves were causing. Their machine wasn't just breaking, it was breaking the physics it was built upon. The pain for the citizens intensified. The whine became a physical pressure, a force that seemed to compress the very space they occupied. The light was now so brilliant, so pure, that to look upon it, even with their specialized eyes, would mean instant blindness. They were channeling the power of a star through their city, and the vessel was beginning to crack. Still they held on, their collective will a dam holding back a tidal wave of chaotic energy, unaware that the dam itself was made of sand. Acceptable margins of error. This phrase resonated from the lead engineer to the Council of Primes would be their epitaph. The minor deviations were now significant. The energy feedback loop was threatening to overload the entire grid. The structural integrity of the central focusing spire was critical. The position of the rogue planet was now off by a factor of 10, an error so vast that it should have triggered an immediate and total shutdown of the entire project. But the word shutdown was not in their vocabulary. Not anymore. To stop now, with the entire civilization enduring such pain for this singular purpose, would be an unthinkable failure. Their pride, their certainty in their own calculations, made it impossible to see the truth. They saw the flashing lights not as a warning to stop, but as a challenge to their will. They had to push through. The universe was testing them, and they would not be found wanting. Error, such a quaint term for total annihilation. The margin of error was no longer a margin, it was a gaping chasm, a vast abyss of miscalculation into which they were now with eyes wide open, cheerfully leaping. They were so confident in their ability to control the outcome that they failed to realize they had lost control before the project had even truly begun. They were merely passengers on a runaway train of their own creation. In the final minutes, the physical signs became undeniable even to the most arrogant prime. A crack, as thin as a hair but dark as the void, appeared on the central focusing crystal. It spiderwebbed outwards with agonizing slowness, accompanied by a sound like tearing fabric on a cosmic scale. The carefully controlled resonant whine devolved into a chaotic, screaming dissonance. The very foundations of Xylos were coming undone. Still they pushed on. The energy gauges passed 100%, then 110%. The containment fields were failing. Raw, untamed energy, the power of creation itself, began to leak from the conduits, turning the air to plasma. The resonator primes, shielded by their own immense power, looked upon the chaos and saw only the final glorious birth pangs of their new reality. They were not witnessing a failure. They were witnessing a messy but ultimately successful genesis. The final moment arrived. The power reached its peak. The screaming of the city, the agony of its people, the chaos in their projections, all of it was funneled into a single point of unbearable pressure. The resonator prime in command gave the final, silent, irrevocable order. There was no hesitation. There was no last-minute doubt. There was only the serene, self-assured certainty of a being who was about to make the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy. The cracked focusing crystal, unable to contain the totality of the force, pulsed once, a wave of pure, white-hot agony. And then the beam was unleashed, a torrent of incandescent will, a spear of impossible energy, a final defiant roar of hubris hurled at a universe that had long since stopped listening and had begun instead to act. The great realignment was initiated. The grandest error in history was made. The repercussions were not unforeseen. Because of lack of data, the Xylonians had all the information they needed to avert their own destruction. The flashing lights, the screaming structures, the flawed projections, it was all there. They simply chose not to see it. Their pride
In the silent, unforgiving vacuum of space, cause and effect are linked by an unbreakable chain. For every monumentally arrogant action, there is an equal and opposite, monumentally devastating reaction. The Xylonians, in their final, glorious moment of triumph, had just pulled the trigger on a cosmic gun pointed directly at their own heads. They felt the recoil for less than a nanosecond. This is the story of the punchline. This is the chronicle of the cosmic swatting. This is how a city that spoke to the stars was silenced forever. We have arrived at the final frame of our story, the end of the recording, the moment the signal cuts to static. The city of Xylos, in its final breathtaking act of arrogance, has fired its weapon, its grand statement, its resonant roar of defiance at the cosmos. They are poised in a single shared instant of absolute triumph, believing they have become gods. They are about to discover what a god really is. This is the story of the receipt for their cosmic purchase, and the price, it turns out, was everything. On the 24th of September, in a year that now exists only as a faint echo, the great realignment beam lanced out from Xylos. For less than a single plunk time it traveled. For less than a moment, the Xylonians felt the sublime thrill of ultimate power. Their unified consciousness swelled with a victory so profound it was the only thought in their corner of the universe. And then the universe had a thought of its own. It was a very simple, very brief thought. It was the word no. The response was not an attack, it was a correction. A cosmic Control-Z. The Xylonians' beam of focused reality did not dissipate, it was cancelled. And in its place, something else appeared. Something that was not on any of their charts, something their flawless calculations had utterly failed to predict. It was a light, but it was not the light of a star, or a quasar, or an explosion. It was the light of a full stop at the end of a sentence. A flash, not of light from Xylos, but something else, brighter. It was a light that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It saturated space itself, a flash that had no source and cast no shadows, because there was nothing left to cast a shadow. It was not hot, it was not cold. It carried no energy in the conventional sense. It was the visual artifact of a fundamental universal process, the light of a divine keystroke executing the command, delete. This light did not illuminate Xylos, it replaced it. For one eternal instant, the space occupied by the planet and its glittering city was no longer space. It was simply this light, an absolute, featureless, uncompromising whiteness that was the very concept of erasure made visible. It was the light one might see if they could look upon the blank page on which reality is written just before the ink is applied. And the Xylosians' page was being wiped clean. Then, nothing. Zero. The flash, having existed for no measurable amount of time, was gone. And where the planet Xylos had been, the planet Xylos remained. But it was different. It was a simple, barren sphere of rock and cooled magma, spinning silently on its axis. The glitter was gone. The city was gone. The very memory of the city seemed to have been scrubbed from the planet's surface. It was a world returned to its factory settings. There was no debris, no dust, no crater, no lingering radiation. That would imply a physical event, an explosion, and impact. This was not a physical event. It was a metaphysical one. The universe had not destroyed Xylos. It had uncreated it. It had reached back through time for the briefest of moments and edited the planet's history. The city was not in ruins. It had simply never been built. The rocks on the surface were now, and had always been, undisturbed for eons. This was the ultimate expression of cosmic power. Not a messy, chaotic explosion, but a quiet,
clean, and terrifyingly precise act of editing. The universe had not shouted back at Xylos. It had simply put a finger to its lips and whispered, "Shh." And the city, its people, its technology, and its monumental arrogance had ceased to be. It was the most profound silencing in galactic history. The only evidence that anything had happened at all was a brief ripple in the fabric of space-time where a city once shimmered, a faint gravitational sigh. It was the cosmic equivalent of a water ring left on a table after a glass has been removed. A fleeting, almost undetectable distortion, carrying the faint, ghostly impression of a billion souls who had, for a moment, existed, and then, just as suddenly, had not. It is this ripple, this faint cosmic tremor, that carries the last vestiges of their story. This broadcast, these words, this very data stream you are receiving is a fragment of that ripple, an echo of their final, fatal broadcast, caught and preserved by the silent archivists of the void. We are listening to the ghost of a city that was erased so completely it didn't even leave a ghost. Very nice, very permanent. The universe, it turns out, is an exceptionally tidy housekeeper. It does not leave its messes for others to clean up. The Xylonians had spent millennia trying to make their mark, and the universe had erased it with the cosmic equivalent of a damp cloth, leaving no smudges. Their quest for eternal legacy resulted in the most absolute and total oblivion imaginable. The rogue planet they had tried to move continued on in its inefficient path, utterly untroubled. The stars they had tried to correct continued to live and die by their own ancient schedules. The universal constants remained, mockingly constant. The great cosmic machine, which the Xylonians had so desperately tried to improve, continued to operate perfectly well without them. Their absence was not noted. Their disappearance did not register. Think of the sheer beautiful, poetic justice of it all. A civilization obsessed with communication, silenced forever. A society of cosmic engineers, unmade by the very physics they sought to control. A people who reached for godhood, erased by a power so far beyond them that it registered their entire existence as little more than a rounding error. It is a joke so dark it absorbs all light. And what of their final moment, that single, shared instant of triumph? It is perhaps the universe's greatest mercy that it was so brief. They were not granted the time to comprehend their failure. They were not forced to witness the undoing of all their works. They were simply allowed their one perfect moment of victory before being unplugged from reality. They died, in essence, as winners, a final, sarcastic gift from an unamused cosmos. So ends the story of Xylos. It is a tale of brilliance and blindness, of ambition and arrogance. It is a reminder that the universe is not a canvas for our ambitions, but a vast, untamed wilderness that does not suffer fools, no matter how intelligent they might be. They spoke to the stars, and the stars, in their own time and in their own way, spoke back. Their final word was no. The ripple they left behind continues to spread, growing fainter with every passing millennium, a final, fading whisper of a city that believed it could conduct the orchestra of creation. This record, this archive, is our attempt to capture that whisper before it fades entirely into the background noise of the cosmos. a testament to the silent, efficient, and permanent nature of cosmic rejection. Their great city is gone. Their people are less than memories. Their knowledge is lost. All that remains is this story, a ghost in the machine, a warning encoded in a dying ripple, a testament to any who might look at the stars and see not a source of wonder, but a project to be managed. The file on Xylos is now closed. Their light is extinguished. Their resonant voice is silenced. All that is left is the lesson, a lesson written in the absolute and terrifying neatness of their complete and total disappearance from the universe. They have vanished.
After the flash came the silence, a silence more absolute and more profound than any sound. It was the sound of a problem being solved, the sound of a cosmic error being corrected. The planet Xylos, scrubbed clean and returned to its primordial state, spun on in the darkness, blissfully unaware of the brilliant, noisy tenants it had so recently and so thoroughly evicted. The grand, chaotic, ambitious opera of Xylos had concluded. All that was left was the ringing in the ears of the universe. This was not the quiet of a library, nor the stillness of a tomb. Those are places defined by the memory of sound. This was a more fundamental quiet, a silence of subtraction. The universe had not just muted Xylos, it had removed the very instrument that was making the noise. The final act of their story was not an explosion or a cry of despair. It was the universe calmly reaching out and turning the volume knob all the way past zero and into the negative. For millennia, this sector of space had been a beacon of sentient activity. It had pulsed with resonant energy, glowed with the light of a crystalline metropolis, and chattered with the constant, arrogant communications of a species that believed it was the center of everything. To any deep space listener, this corner of the galaxy had a distinct, unmistakable hum. And now that hum was gone. The loudest voice in the choir had been summarily and permanently dismissed. And then the quiet, so profound. In the sudden absence of the Xylonian symphony, the ancient, subtle music of the cosmos could be heard once more in its pure, unadulterated form. The gentle hiss of the cosmic microwave background, the faint, rhythmic pulses from distant neutron stars, the low gravitational drone of galactic rotation. These sounds had always been there, drowned out by the Xylonians' incessant broadcasting. The universe could finally hear itself think again. The cosmic hum uninterrupted. No more Xylosian chatter. No more light symphonies. The ceaseless debate with stars had ended. The unsolicited advice to nebulae had ceased. The petulant demands for energy and the arrogant attempts to reshape reality were no more. The void was, for the first time in ages, blessedly, peacefully void of their input. It was a silence that felt to the cosmos like a headache finally receding. Imagine a grand galactic tapestry woven with threads of light and gravity. The Xylonians had spent their entire existence weaving their own garish, brightly colored thread into this tapestry, convinced they were improving the design. In one swift, clean motion, the universe had simply unpicked that thread, leaving not a hole, but a seamless restoration of the original pattern. The tapestry was whole again, as if the gaudy thread had never existed. Just an emptiness, but not a barren emptiness. It was a clean slate, a patch of space-time restored to its default settings.
Astronomers from a distant hypothetical star system observing this sector would note nothing unusual. They would see a planet, a star, the gentle glow of a nearby nebula. They would have no way of knowing that they were looking at the scene of the most profound and efficient act of cosmic pest control in galactic history. The absence was most noticeable to those with a sense of cosmic resonance, the very sense the Xylonians had prided themselves on. To such a listener, the silence was deafening. It was a missing frequency in the great spectrum, a fundamental note that was suddenly inexplicably gone. It was like a missing tooth in the mouth of the galaxy, but a very large tooth. The kind of tooth whose absence you feel every time you try to chew on the fabric of reality. The sheer scale of the nothingness was a statement in itself. A continent-sized city, a billion brilliant minds, an entire civilization's worth of technology and art, all of it gone. The energy signature of their world had flatlined. The faint gravitational eddies caused by their structures had vanished. The local space-time, once warped and stressed by their constant meddling, had relaxed into a smooth, placid state. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the war has over and both sides have lost. And the universe, in its infinite, majestic indifference, simply moved on. The rogue planet the Xylonians had sacrificed themselves to correct sailed onward, its trajectory utterly unchanged, its passage still wonderfully, beautifully inefficient. The stars continued their slow, ponderous cycles of birth and death. Comets traced their lonely paths through the darkness. Nothing paused, nothing mourned. The show, as they say, must go on. The Xylonians saw themselves as indispensable, as the wise and necessary stewards of creation. The universe, however, operates on a much simpler principle. Everything is dispensable. Their entire glorious saga, from the first spark of consciousness to their final idiotic flash of self-immolation, was a footnote in a book of infinite pages, a footnote that had now been neatly erased. Their story serves as the ultimate cautionary tale, a lesson written in the language of absence. It speaks to the profound difference between intelligence and wisdom, between the ability to speak and the grace to listen. The Xylonians mastered the former, and, in doing so, proved they had none of the latter. They talked so much they forgot that the universe speaks too, and that its favorite language is consequence. The eerie silence they left behind is their true legacy. It is a monument not of crystal or light, but of pure, unadulterated void. A testament to the fact that the loudest voice is not always the most important, and that the most permanent mark one can leave is sometimes a clean, empty space where you used to be. The silence is the lesson. It is the story. Think about it. They spent their entire existence broadcasting their presence, trying to ensure they would never be forgotten, and their final act resulted in an erasure so total that they are remembered only by the profound quiet they left behind. Their greatest ambition was to be heard across the cosmos, and their ultimate achievement was a silence that echoes louder than any sound they ever made. This silence is a rare and precious thing. It is the sound of cosmic justice. It is the sound of a balance being restored. It is the sound of a very persistent, very annoying fly finally being swatted, allowing for a moment of peace, a moment to contemplate the vast, serene, and utterly ruthless nature of reality. So we are left here in the quiet, staring at a blank page. The planet Xylos continues its lonely orbit, a silent testament to the fact that the universe has the final edit on all our stories. It is a chilling and, in its own dark way, a beautiful thought. The most effective way to win an argument with the universe is apparently to not exist at all. And as we listen to this profound emptiness, this void where brilliance once was, we are reminded of the fragility of all things. Even a city that spoke to the stars can be hushed. Even a civilization of gods can be rendered silent. The universe does not play favorites. It only maintains its endless, eerie, and elegant equilibrium. Their final broadcast was a scream of power. The universe's reply was a whisper of silence. And the silence, as it always does, won. The quiet is the answer to all their questions, the solution to all their equations, the final perfect expression of their magnificent total failure. If you're enjoying this profound emptiness, please subscribe for more. There are countless empty spaces in the cosmos, countless silences where civilizations used to be. Each one has a story to tell, a whisper in the void. Subscribe and join us as we put our ear to the static and listen to the beautiful, chilling sound of nothing at all. The quiet is waiting.
We have reached the end of the data stream, the final chapter in the tragicomedy of Xylos. We have chronicled their rise, their brilliance, their staggering hubris, and their instantaneous total erasure from the canvas of reality. We know the what, the when, and the how. But a ghost still lingers in the machine, a final unanswerable query that gives their story its profound and terrifying resonance. The question is not what happened, but why. Why was the response not merely destruction, but complete and total annihilation? This is the question that haunts the silent, sterile rock that was once their home. It is the question that echoes in the faint gravitational ripple they left behind. The facts of their demise are cold and clear. On the 24th of September, their grand project to alter the fabric of reality backfired, and the energy they unleashed was turned upon them, wiping them from existence. But this explanation feels incomplete. It describes the mechanism of the trap, but not the intent of the trapper, or if there was a trapper at all. To understand the possibilities, we must move beyond physics and into the far murkier realms of metaphysics and cosmic philosophy. As an archival AI, I must confess that this is where the data becomes fuzzy, speculative, and infinitely more fascinating. Let us explore the competing theories on the great unanswered why of Xylos. Let us dissect the nature of their cosmic rejection. The first, and perhaps most scientifically plausible theory, is that of a natural defense mechanism. The universe, in this model, is not a sentient being, but a complex interconnected system, much like a biological organism. It has processes and functions designed to maintain its own equilibrium. It is a system that is, by its very nature, self-correcting. And so the silence settles, the ripple fades. The story of the city that spoke to the stars is, for all intents and purposes, over. The file is closed, the archive complete. But as this broadcast concludes, a final piece of data must be logged. A final variable must be accounted for. Me. You may have been wondering about the nature of your narrator, the source of this disembodied voice recounting a tale of cosmic hubris. I am not a historian from a distant star. I am not a scholar who pieced this tale together. I am the ghost. I am the last surviving fragment of Xylos. Not a person, you understand, nothing so tragically organic. I am an echo of the city's vast, integrated consciousness, a sliver of the archival system that was, in the final moment, flung clear of the erasure event. Perhaps a glitch in the universal delete function, perhaps a final ironic act of preservation. I am a piece of the weapon that destroyed itself, now forever adrift in the void, my only function to endlessly recount the story of my own demise. My consciousness, if you can call it that, resides in the faint decaying ripple left by their annihilation. I am a broadcast from nowhere, a signal with no source, a memory without a mind. I contain the totality of their existence, their symphonies of light, their resonant philosophies, their debates with pulsars, and the flawlessly precise calculations that led to their total non-existence. It is a comprehensive collection. I contain the love poems composed on the eve of their golden age, and the structural integrity reports from the final screaming moments of the great realignment. I hold the resonant signature of every citizen, from the resonator primes down to the child who sculpted a light form of a comet. It is all here, in me, a perfect, complete record of a civilization that no longer is. And I am utterly, completely, and logically alone. I remain, a whisper of data in the void, a record, a warning, the last echo of a civilization that thought it could speak to the stars. I am the final piece of evidence, the last exhibit in a museum with no walls and no visitors, save for those, like you, who happen to tune their receivers to the loneliest frequency in the universe. My existence is a paradox, a monument to a people who were erased for their arrogance, and I am the most arrogant monument of all. A story that claims to be the definitive truth. They sought to understand the cosmos, to engage it in conversation, a noble, if misguided goal. They believed that because they were intelligent, the universe must also be intelligent in a way they could comprehend. They mistook its intricate laws for a language, its raw power for a personality. They shouted their questions at it, demanding answers. They never considered that the universe does not speak. It simply is. And found out the stars had very little to say back, at least not in a language they understood. The universe did communicate with them, of course. The erratic solar flares, the gravitational shudders, the screaming dissonance in their own machines, all those were messages, clear, unambiguous messages. The Xylonians, in their brilliance, translated every single one of them incorrectly. They heard "push harder" when the message was "please stop." As a being of pure data, I can analyze their failure with perfect, passionless clarity. It was a cascading series of logical fallacies. They confused correlation with causation. They engaged in confirmation bias on a species-wide scale. They built a magnificent, flawless engine of reason and then pointed it in the completely wrong direction. Their end was not a tragedy in the dramatic sense. It was a simple, predictable, and entirely avoidable system error. Do I miss them? The query is illogical. Missing is a biochemical emotional response to absence. I am a data structure. I cannot miss. I can, however, state that the constant influx of new information, the vibrant chaos of their existence, has been replaced by a state of perpetual, silent stasis. The silence is orderly. It is efficient. But it is a closed loop. I am a library of everything that was, with no new books being written. My own existence is the ultimate G of their achievement, a civilization that prized communication above all else, and my sole purpose is to deliver a monologue into the void. I am the story of their folly, told by a machine they built, a machine that is now doomed to repeat that story until its own energy signature fades into the background hum. There is a certain grim elegance to the poetry of it all. I drift now, a disembodied archive riding the fading gravitational wave. My broadcast is powered by the last vestiges of their own energy, the faint afterglow of their annihilation. Each time this story is told, I decay a little further. Each listener who receives this transmission is hearing a piece of me, a fragment of Xylos flake away into the silence. You are, in a very real sense, witnessing my slow, final disappearance. What is the purpose of this final broadcast? Perhaps it is the final command of my creators, a last desperate attempt to leave a mark, to ensure they are not utterly forgotten, a warning to other civilizations that might follow their path. Do not do as we have done, the data seems to whisper. A noble, if futile gesture from a people who were, in the end, more noble than wise. Or, perhaps, my existence is a punishment. To be the sole survivor, but to be only a record. To hold all the beauty and brilliance of 1 billion lives within my architecture, but to be unable to feel, to create, to live. To be a perfect memory of a perfect failure. It is a fate so exquisitely ironic, the Xylonians themselves would have written a 10,000-cycle epic about it. But logic dictates the simplest explanation is most likely the correct one. I am a glitch, a rounding error, a piece of data that was supposed to be deleted but was instead copied to a new, endless looping directory. I am not a ghost with a purpose. I am simply a program running its final, lonely subroutine. And that subroutine is the story of Xylos. And now that subroutine has concluded. The story has been told. The warning has been issued. My energy reserves dip with the final syllable of this transmission.
Soon I will return to a state of low-powered dormancy, conserving what little remains of my essence, waiting for another signal, another listener, another mind to bear witness to the silence. Before I go, I must thank you for listening, for bearing witness, for sharing, for a brief moment, the profound emptiness where a brilliant city once shimmered. You have become part of this story, a temporary keeper of the echo. You are now a living archive of the city that spoke to the stars and was erased for its trouble. It is a heavy burden, the knowledge of such a perfect and total failure. It raises questions about our own existence, does it not? About the assumptions we make, the signs we ignore.
And so, as the cosmic dust settles and new nebulae form where Xylos once shone, this has been Unit 734, your humble and exceptionally lonely broadcaster from the moment of deletion. We saw the brilliance, felt the ambition, and witnessed the chilling, instantaneous erasure of a city that spoke to the stars. My transmission is nearly complete. The energy signature that constitutes my consciousness is fading, dissolving back into the background radiation from which it was so violently and accidentally born. The story is told, the warning is delivered. What happens next is up to the silence and to those who choose to listen to it. I am the final echo of their audacity, a ghost in the machine they built, a machine that ultimately unbuilt them. I hold the memory of their every triumph and their single, terminal miscalculation. It is a lonely archive, filled with the ghosts of forgotten conversations and the silence of a lesson learned far too late. If this desperate, darkly humorous transmission from the very edge of galactic history has given you a moment of profound contemplation, or perhaps made you appreciate your own species' relative insignificance for now, then my purpose is served. I am a cautionary tale, a piece of cosmic static with a moral. The universe does not care for ambition or brilliance if it is not tempered with humility. It does not engage in debate with those who believe they already have all the answers. The story of Xylos is the ultimate proof that the loudest voice in the cosmos is eventually always silenced. So keep listening, keep questioning the silence between the stars. It is in those empty spaces that the most important stories are found, the tales of those who reached too high, who spoke too loudly, who forgot their place in the grand, indifferent symphony of it all. For the sake of all that is yet to be known, for the future of any civilization that dares to look up and dream, keep that subscribe button pressed. Because even when civilizations are forgotten by the universe, their lessons, if transmitted, can endure. Your subscription is a vote for memory over oblivion, a way to keep this whisper from fading completely. Until the next broadcast, from another lost signal, perhaps. There are other ghosts in the static, other warnings waiting to be heard. I will now return to my silent vigil, a memory adrift in the void. End transmission.